Welcome back to Purposely Unplugged with Lori. I'm Dave Scott, Hub Media. Today our subject is intimacy. Lori's been bugging me for months to do this one, and I put it off, folks. I'm not going to lie to you. I ran and hid because I really didn't have a clue what intimacy was. And when you explained it, when we're looking at the family of origin, okay, now I see that stream and why I need to be more conscious of it. So let's start there. What's the connection going all the way back to our January show when we started on family of origin? Lori?
Yeah, family of origin is important, Dave. So whether I'm working with a couple, whether I'm working with an individual, just gentle conversations around, well, how did your parents interact around intimacy? Were you able to talk about body parts? Were you able to talk about privacy? Were you even able to have these conversations? Was this a subject so taboo in your household that there's guilt and shame attached to your body and the way that you were intimate with yourself or with someone else?
Wow. Right, trying to unpack all that right there.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you start looking back generations again to see where this pattern lies. And I kind of looked at, because when you brought this to my attention and we started talking, because the definition that I read was more a feeling of being close and emotionally connected and supported, being able to share a whole range of thoughts, feelings, and experiences is kind of, when I looked it up, because I was trying to figure it out in my head, to be honest with you, as a 60-year-old male, I'm still like, I don't know. Right. And do you have to sort of define it to break it down to even start looking at it?
You can, but Dave, the definition around all of these things are changing every minute in our society. So that's part of this conversation too. As I realize there's so many parts of this conversation, maybe this is 2 or 3 sessions, which is okay.
Yeah.
Because there's many, many parts here. So in all reality, though, if we don't have that intimacy that you're talking about, close relationship, being able to talk about things, being safe, being able to kind of have expression and communication about things, then if we don't have that as the foundation, then we wouldn't be talking about intimacy between people or at a sexual level, which is a whole nother conversation as well.
This is such an important part of what you do.
Yeah.
How do you start this conversation then? Sort of walk me through it a little bit, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. It's different with everyone, but even young people, I really need people to know that there isn't a topic we can't talk about, and that sexuality or intimacy and whatever that means to someone is totally fine. And really, Dave, I value the fact that people need to know that it's safe, it's okay, and this is a conversation that can happen. And often I bring it up. We'll do history, we'll do all the things we normally do, but then we will start talking about, if it's a married couple, absolutely. This has to be a portion we talk about. And with many individuals, it's just that safety to know it's okay to talk about.
And like you said, it goes backwards, right? And maybe we should sort of define that a little bit, because probably you and I, well, you're a lot younger than me, let's be honest. Growing up, different families looked at this subject in different lights. And I think that's kind of where sometimes it can get really confusing, because if your family looked at it a certain way and talked about it and my family didn't, well, I have no clue where you're coming from. Is that what you see bouncing in relationships sometimes?
Absolutely. So we bring that to our relationships. And remember last year we talked about marriage as well, just that general
Yeah.
cycle, the first year, then 3 to 5, then after 7. So there's so many layers to this with a couple, but definitely with a couple, we all come with our idea of what healthy sexuality is, how intimate we should be, what that should look like. And often it's not something we really talk about because we'll just figure it out. At the beginning, there's so much emotion and passion involved, but it's later on that 3 to 5 year mark, 7 year mark is where some of this really, really comes up. But honestly, Dave, the author I follow around this, the professional I follow around this is Tammy Nelson. So I always reflect back to Tammy Nelson, and I've done some training with her. So it's really, I operate in the same way that she would. And in a couple situation, we have to talk about this. Couples have different levels of desires, they have different levels of expectations. And then once there's any kind of sexual dysfunction that starts to interact, it gets really difficult, Dave. So all of those conversations are okay. in a conversation with me.
So you're having the conversation. I want to break this down a bit more
Yeah.
because, like we talked about defining intimacy.
Mhm.
Like, do you think there's like 3 or 4 different categories of it then? Like, can I say that? Because I'm thinking of an intimacy in a relationship, a constant conversation, about things and experiences, like, and feelings. And then you're looking at the sexual content of it as well. Is that I mean, they overlap, they got overlap. But I mean, is
Mhm.
there sort of those defining areas? And probably a third, like you said, with the dysfunction, right?
Mhm. Yeah. So, good way of saying it that way. So, one of the ideas that Tammy Nelson talks about is social monogamy, meaning we're together in a relationship as roommates to figure out who's paying the bills, who's doing all those kinds of things. That's kind of that emotional connection, safety, knowing someone's already there, got my back, really that connectedness piece. But the second layer she talks about is then the sexual monogamy, how we then manage our bodies and what we do with our bodies together or with anyone else. So she breaks it down that way. I really like it that way. And that's what you're talking about. There's all these layers in a relationship, particularly, and maybe there are several conversations here. And even when we're talking about someone on their own, I mean, it's managing their own safety and how they're interacting with other people as well. So even if someone's single, this is a really big conversation.
And with, like, if we're sort of starting this from stage one and looking at if someone comes into you and talks to you about this, the family history of not having those conversations, well, what, I guess my point on this one is what's deemed appropriate? I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as a kid growing up, I don't remember having those conversations with my parent, but then I'm not sure what I should have been listening to or understanding.
True, but that's again where society has changed around us now, Dave. So if you look at the information that young people are getting in the school system, this is something talked about very, very early around identity and around self. And so there's conversations that are happening in the school system now that are very different. So parenting today is very different than the parenting you and I would have experienced
Right.
before. So there are you as we keep talking about this, you're right, there's multiple layers. So what is deemed appropriate? We need to be able to talk to the young people in our home about safety, about their bodies, about intimacy. The big model is a circle, right? Who is in my inner circle, the outer circle, and the very
Right.
outer circle. All of these conversations come up depending how old a person is that I'm working with.
Right.
But we, I think, as parents and as a society, so maybe even we as grandparents, need to be thinking that the conversations that young people have right now are very different than the conversations you and I were used to before. And so that does affect us, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
if there was shame or guilt around what all of this meant in your family of origin, it's drastically different now for our grandchildren as well. And the reason we need to be aware of this so young now is the statistics around sexual abuse and what's happening for young people and how vulnerable they are, not only in their own homes, but on the internet as well.
Well, when you brought that up, it's funny that you said that. And my mind was kind of thinking along those lines already. It's got to be appropriate for that age, but you're signaling it's a protectionism too built in, right? To have those conversations because you don't want anything happening to your child, your grandchild, or anything of that matter, of that nature. So that conversation has to be, boy, that, has to be had, but it has to be had in the right context at the right time.
It does. And I think one of the biggest things talking about too is just that it's normal. Does
Yeah.
not have to be shame and guilt around this, that this is a very normal conversation. We'll share with the listeners that usually I send you a little bit of a brief before we get into these things, but 1% of society is not intimate in a sexual nature with anyone. So I'm not good at math, but that means 99% of all of us have some kind of connection, whether we're calling it intimacy, whatever we're calling it, with someone or themselves, which is just something to frame this conversation with.
And it's funny. I'm glad you brought that up because I almost look at it, framing that conversation in that context makes it more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's not a number that you can deny 99%. And, you know, I'm still stuck on the first part of it because I think you want to, establish that so you understand where we're going to step forward in this, and that intimacy, like you said, with the different layers and how we approach them. And I like that you went, like, I don't want to say protectionism, but it kind of is. You're educating your child, right? And you're helping them understand what the world is like today. Like you just said, it's totally different from 50 years ago. So I think that's a very relative point. Are the conversations easier these days?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I've been talking about this for a long time. I mean, I've been lecturing this since kind of 2008. So that's interesting. I'd say from my personal experience, the difference is that everything's on the internet now. And everyone's walking around with a little wee tiny computer. And so young people have access to information now far easier and sooner than you or I did. And I mean, I reflect back to when my own boys, and we didn't even have cell phones then, but I mean, my own boys would come to me with things that, I'd have to really think about as well. So that's tough, Dave. I can't really say, but the
Gotcha.
fact that we are all walking around with mini computers in our hands, and young people are, that they're influenced by what they see, what they read, what they hear.
My next question: who has a better understanding of intimacy, males or females?
I don't think that you can put any judgment there, and I wouldn't dare put a judgment there because
Damn.
that's just you wanted me to put a judgment there. No,
I honestly thought you were going to go, well, if we really want to get down to it, guys don't have a clue, right?
no,
But
no, I wouldn't say that. I would say it really comes down to what someone's exposed to, how open they are in their thinking, how much they like, and plus this depends on age too.
right.
But in all honesty, I don't think we can paint that picture at all. That wouldn't be fair. Um, I've seen just as many adult males who are concerned about their level of intimacy as I have seen adult women concerned about what this looks like for their relationships. And
Okay.
in young people, I would say there is no difference at all. I mean, I'm used to talking to young people, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16. So, and they kind of giggle because I'm like, I know I'm an old lady, but we can talk about this. So that kind of makes them giggle. So I would say with the next generation, there's even less of a difference in the way folks are talking about this.
Okay. So this is my next question. Are you prepared?
I don't know. You're trying to bait me here, Dave. I don't know.
Oh.
No controversy. This is a bad enough topic. Let's not make it
It's
worse.
no. I'm asking these questions because
Yeah.
growing up and understanding men and women, right? Does intimacy, I think, and this, I'll put myself on the stand here. Intimacy grows in a relationship. You don't start out with it 100%. It's the experiences in life, maybe having a child or having an accident, or being involved in a scenario where it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, that partner of yours takes on part of that intimacy that you're stuck in or that you've gone through. True or false?
Sometimes that same kind of trauma pulls couples apart.
Good point. Ooh, she was on
So,
it, folks. I thought I had her. You're
no,
right, though.
in all
Totally right. I never
honesty,
thought about it.
sometimes that kind of trauma pulls couples apart too. So it's not an easy answer. So I think we've pulled out probably five more topics that we didn't even anticipate we were going to lead towards, but there's several topics here.
Well, and I think what you talked about at the beginning when we were talking, one of the ones we want to talk about is the sexual intimacy. But I think what we're trying to do is level the playing field to understand better what intimacy is before you even we take on that next topic. And I think, like you said, it really depends on the individuals in the couple, or where you've been in your life. I guess the experiences that you've had sort of might dictate how the intimacy role changes within your own life, because I do think that happens to a degree. I do think if you looked at a young 25-year-old Dave, it's a totally different person. And I'm sure it's the same thing with you, Lori. So I think from that point of view, do you look at, I mean, going down that road with the clients that you have, are you helping them develop the skills to understand it or to be part of it within intimacy?
Well, it's a full content, like it's a continuum, really. And it's really, what do you need at this point? What information, what conversation, what safety, what do you need at this point? And then shifting with the client as they move through their awareness and through what's important to them. So it's not static. Maybe that's a good point to make, that all of these things around intimacy and relationships and connection and emotional safety, all of these things are constantly changing in our lives. And it's a blessing for me to be able to walk with these conversations with all the clients that I have.
And I guess to wrap up this one too is,
Mhm.
do you think people are confused about what intimacy really is?
Well, perhaps. I mean, I knew what I was thinking it was, and even the definition that you brought this morning. So, even in the way we prepared for today, absolutely, I think intimacy is different for everyone. And that's where it comes down to, what does it mean for you? And who are the people in your life right now that you are interacting with in this way?
Interesting. I mean, I think next month, where do you want to go with this next month? Because I I think we've sort of got a groundwork here.
Right.
People that watch this video, maybe let us know what you think, because now we want to look at the other aspects of it. Sexually, I guess, is the next one to tackle.
Sure.
Um,
And so, what we would do with the next one as well is just give a warning at the beginning that it's not easy to talk about some of these things.
no,
And there is no offense. We would never want to offend. And all these conversations, I guess we would just welcome the listeners to say what it is they're interested in. Because, yes, there is a marital piece of this, there's an infidelity piece of this, there is a sexual abuse piece of this.
yeah,
There is a piece about this around exploration and who am I at
right,
any age in my life in relation to intimacy with another person, and what does this look like?
okay. How do people get a hold of you?
226-934-7425, and the website purposefullyunplugged.com. You'll see some changes coming soon as the address has changed, and photos will soon change. So for those who've checked my site in the past, there'll be some changes coming. But definitely phone. I am most responsive to phone. Email Lori at purposefullyunplugged.com.
And I hear you're back working with your partner again. Is this true?
Uh, Not Mask,
Oh,
but
okay.
Mask's daughter. So her
Oh,
heifer.
cool.
So yes, Hope is my new associate. And like I said, pictures will be changing. Now, my other associate is Grace, who is a 6-month-old pug.
Okay.
So
Um, and that's cool. I'm happy that you're, for the people that don't know, maybe explain this aspect of what you do in your work.
perfect. As I came through my master's and developed my business, I truly believe, Dave, that being outside and being in nature and being around animals is just so beneficial. I've done some work around nature therapy and forest walks, along with animal assisted therapy. I had been working with a cow. She was lovely, but through a transition, I am now working with her calf, who is named Hope. So some clients will be able to interact with Hope right in the pasture, pet her, touch her, cuddle her, whatever you like to do. And Grace is new with me as well. And she's very, very responsive and interactive in most sessions. So clients have the option to interact with animals, to interact with nature, or not. There are several options to choose from. But I do believe, and that's why I called myself Purposely Unplugged. No hydro, no Wi Fi, no water, purposefully unplugged as close to nature as possible.
Very cool. Can't wait to talk next month. Uh, Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.